Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing great out there. Please consider signing up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group with the inside scoop on all things BYU sports that I am hearing coming to your phone in the form of a text message. Not much more intimate or direct than that. The best part is you can engage in one-on-one conversations via text message with myself, and also allows you to get, like I said, the inside scoop on all things BYU. Join us today, just $5 a month. Click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it wherever you get your podcast. And the kicker is you don't pay anything for a full 14 days, a full 2 weeks. You get a free trial period for that to see if it's the right option for you guys. So join us once again on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk BYU football. Now, they're in the final week. The alumni game is coming up on Friday night. If you're going to get out and watch that on Friday, should be another fun event. Obviously, it's fun to see the former Cougars who come out and engage with their teammates. Kalani Sitake is always out there. There's a number of the current football players who are milling around. It's a great opportunity to interact with the team as they wrap up spring camp. What have been the biggest takeaways from spring camp from my vantage point? Now, there are a couple more practices to go, but the biggest thing I have taken away from spring camp, both having watched portions of it, but also having conversations, many of you know, with people in and around the football program, is how physical this camp has been for BYU. Kalani has been referring to, he's been talking about the fact that the only way we get better is by having guys hit one another. And he's very careful, I think, to understand that, hey, there's a fine line between just having guys butt heads and end up being injured versus strategically having them tackle and play the game of football, which is an inherently dangerous sport. I hate hearing from fans, just to step on my soapbox for a moment, that, hey, they could have avoided this by doing this. Guys, any of you, and I know a number of you did play football. I don't care what level is at, whether it's peewee, junior high, high school, even college, maybe even played in the pros. Football is an inherently dangerous sport. There is an inherent risk that you will get injured when you're wearing full padded body armor and hitting guys like locomotives and freight trains. These are guys that are running upwards of 20 miles an hour in certain circumstances, run into full-on collisions. I have had it compared to me by multiple people that what players go through, even at the collegiate level, is equivalent to a car crash every single week, and they essentially spend the following week trying to get themselves back into working order enough to go and get into another car crash, and they repeat it 14, 15 times a season. In the NFL, it's what, 20 times if you win the Super Bowl. It is a brutal, brutal sport, but you cannot back away from that when you're trying to get guys trained up for the season. And Kalani Sitake, he has embraced full well that he understands that guys will get hurt playing the style of football that BYU plays with and the way that they practice it. They have full-on padded practices where they're tackling one another, and guys get twisted, guys get hit in the just – things happen in the sport of football, and that's something that BYU is engaged in this spring camp. And I think it's ultimately going to yield a tougher and more well-rounded BYU football team, but it has not come without its dings and dents. As I understand it, there have been a number of guys who I don't think there's been many season-ending injuries. Now, Kalani Sitake will clarify that at the end of spring camp. We'll obviously hear an update on that. But the bigger point to be made is there have been a number of guys that have been sitting out spring ball, either A, that they're veterans and you don't need to risk them in terms of injury, or B, they got an injury early on in camp and they're veteran enough that the coaches said, hey, we understand what you can do. Let's take it easy here for the rest of spring camp. It has opened opportunities with those guys stepping away from the field, and they've been stepping into pseudo coaching roles while they're on the sidelines, speaking of the vets, to allow young players to go out there and prove themselves. And it's been an absolute gauntlet in many respects from what I understand. As guys have picked up dings and dents that, yes, they obviously are banged up going into this final week of spring camp, but it's nothing that obviously a few months of training, rehab, etc., ahead of training camp beginning in August won't heal in time. That's the thing about this is you got to understand that, yes, you may not be hearing much about certain players. I can think of, for example, I have people ask me often, Jake, what are you seeing from Parker Kingston out there? And I'm like, well, I've seen Parker on the sideline a lot. And I think it's simply due to the fact that Parker may have picked up an injury early on in camp, and he is Parker doesn't need to prove much more than he's already proved. He's an elite punt returner. He had 2 punt returns for touchdowns last year. He is emerging into one of the best receivers in BYU's wide receiving core, plays that slot receiver role as well as anybody not named JD Falslev in recent memory for BYU. And I love the fact that, hey, if he's got a small issue health-wise, don't risk him. You don't need to throw him out there. Young players have been given an opportunity in his stead to go out there and prove themselves. We have seen nice plays from guys like Te'i Nakua. And I'm talking about wide receivers here, but this goes across all the different position groups. Yeah, Te'i Nakua. Also, guys, who am I thinking of? Keelan Marion. By the way, Keelan probably doesn't need to be out there, but he has proven himself to be an emerging force. He looks like he's ready to step in to that role that Darius Lasser is vacating opposite Chase Roberts. And Keelan looks absolutely legit this spring camp. It's been awesome to hear of all of his exploits, watch him with my own eyes. He looks like a completely different player, and that's in addition to him being an All-American kick returner. But the thing is, wide receiver, yeah, Te'i Nakua's had opportunities to show out. Dominique McKenzie, obviously one of the twins, sons of a former BYU running back, Brian McKenzie. Dom's finally getting an opportunity to emerge, and he's a true speedster, much like his brother Marcus on the defensive side of the football. That's the same thing for a guy like Marcus McKenzie. He's had some pretty injury-filled campaigns of late, but so far in spring camp, he has shown, I think, an adaptability to maybe step in to be one of the top 4 corners for BYU this year. We haven't seen much of Evan Johnson in spring camp, so it's opened the door for other corners, young corners, to step up like Marcus McKenzie. So it's been a physical camp for BYU, and that's the way that Kalani Sitake wants it to be every single year. He will endeavor to have that as long as he's BYU football head coach. He tried to like back guys off of one another early on in his tenure and realized, you know what? We're not tackling well. Remember how bad some of those defenses were? And I know that coaching is part of it, also player effort level and the like, but BYU didn't tackle in certain years. They did tackle very lightly in certain years, and it showed that they struggled to tackle in games. I think Kalani has the mindset, you know what? As he said, the only way to get better at the skills you need to do in football is to do them in practice. And yes, that puts guys at risk of injury. We get all that. But BYU's got an elite sports science staff. They've got an elite training staff. They've got an elite strength and conditioning staff right now that, looking back at last season, yes, guys got injured during the year, just like I said, due to the inherent risk in football. But BYU made it through that season very, very healthy relatively. And I had certain guys tell me, I think Connor Pace said it on this very podcast himself in his own words, that they felt stronger and fresher at the end of the year than they had in previous seasons. That screams that the sports science staff, the training staff, the strength and conditioning staff, they're working to get guys into peak physical condition and keep them there through the rough and tumble nature of a college football campaign. Spring camp, it's a brutal time because a lot of young players are trying to establish themselves, and especially with this roster cut down that's going to be imposed on BYU, a lot of young players are at risk of losing their dream of playing for the BYU football program. And that's obviously a tough pill to swallow for these young men, but they also, I think, understand that the opportunity they have right now, they've got to go out and seize it. And it's a critical time in this final week as BYU wraps up spring camp for those guys to put a lasting impression on the minds of the coaches. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cougars. As always, thank you for your support. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share this with your family and friends. Do all the things that help this audience grow. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, once again, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.